This is the $1 million card you've never heard about. Recently, this SGC 3.5 Joe Doyle Error card just sold for $1.3 million on Robert Edward auctions. This card was owned by a North Carolina collector born in 1900. It eventually wound up in the hands of his great-grandson. He found it sitting undisturbed in a scrapbook and recently got the card appraised. Later in this video, we're going to look at the other Joe Doyle Error cards that have been graded, and it gets really strange when you start looking at some of the serial numbers on these cards and the history behind it. The original owner of this SGC 3.5 would ask people who were smoking the cigarettes in his hometown for the cards that were in the packs. He would also gather cards from newspaper workers and fellow collectors. What an incredible find. Now, who is Joe Doyle and what makes this card so desirable? There's 4 T206 cards that stand out among the rest. That is the Honus Wagner, the Sherry McGee Error card, the Eddie Plank, and the Joe Doyle Error card. These 4 cards are known as the Big Four in the T206 set. Joe Doyle only played in the MLB for 5 seasons. He played on the New York Highlanders, which is actually the New York Yankees, and he also played for the Cincinnati Reds. His nickname is Slow Joe. He would take a lot of time between pitches, often stalling for notable amounts of time. In his major league debut on August 25th, 1906, he shut out the Cleveland Naps, and then in the very next game he pitched in, he shut out the Washington Senators. So back-to-back shutout games. Only 3 American League pitchers have thrown shutouts in their first 2 big league appearances since Joe Doyle did it. In 1907, his strikeouts per 9 innings ratio was 4.37, which was the 6th best in the league. He appeared in 17 games in 1909 with 15 starts. He went 8 for 6 with a 2.58 ERA and also throwing 3 shutouts. For Joe's career, he won 22 games, he lost 21 games, posted a ERA of 2.85, he walked 147 batters, and struck out 209. As a batter, he hit 163 in 135 career at-bats. Career WAR is a good metric to show how good a player is. His career WAR is 4.9. To give you an idea, Don Wilson is ranked number 1,000 in career WAR at 27.7. So Joe Doyle is not even close to the top 1,000 in career WAR. If we take the top leaders in WAR for just pitchers, the player that's ranked at number 1,000 has a career WAR of 12.7. So again, Joe does not crack the top 1,000 in career WAR for pitchers. According to baseballreference.com, for his Hall of Fame statistics, they have him around 2,303. To give you an idea of this stat, you're likely a Hall of Famer if you score 100. So they have him ranked 2,303rd with a rating of 1. JAWS, which is a metric that measures a player's Hall of Fame worthiness, he is ranked 1,452nd. So again, for this, he's not even in the top 1,000 pitchers for this stat. Now his ERA was 2.85, which you would think is pretty good. The only problem is it was during the dead ball period. The dead ball period was approximately around 1900 to 1920. And the reason was there was low scoring games and lack of home runs. In 1908, it was the lowest league run average in history, with teams averaging only 3.4 runs per game. By 1921, offenses were scoring 40% more runs and hitting 4 times as many home runs as they had in 1918. There's a lot of debate and theories of why this changed. One of them is changes in the ball, outlawing certain pitches, more baseballs per game, stat keeping and rule changes, Babe Ruth, and ballpark dimensions. Now, I'm not trying to be hard on Joe Doyle. Baseball was still a developing game in the early 1900s. Today, there's been a ton of advancement in nutrition, strength training, and just the overall development of the game. The athletes in the 1900s, they paved the way of how baseball is played today, and they did it with a lot less resources. You're able to learn from what previous people have done throughout history, and it just makes you better, whether that's in training or nutrition and just how to play the game altogether. Today in America, we make sports an idol. We put it on some type of pedestal, and these athletes are being paid millions of dollars today. You can't find much information on Joe Doyle's salary when he played for the New York Highlanders, but it said his salary was $2,000 when he played for the Reds. $2,000 in 1911 is equivalent to around $64,000 today. The average American was making $300 to $500 per year at that time. From my understanding, he was getting paid pretty well, at least for the Cincinnati Reds. Something else to point out is Joe Doyle had a lot of trouble with injuries, and I'm assuming it was mostly on his throwing arm. What I think is crazy is he starts out his MLB career with 2 shutout wins, and then he only ends up playing 7 more games that season. So that's 9 total games for that whole MLB season. In 1910, he only played 3 games for the Highlanders, and then when he got sent to the Reds, he only played 5 games. So you really have to wonder if Joe Doyle was battling injuries with his throwing arm throughout his career. Now, I don't know if this is 100% true, but on April 19th, 1909, he did not pitch again until June 16th. Apparently, this was due to an attack of blood poisoning from cutting his big toe with a penknife. After Joe Doyle's career in the MLB, he played in the minor league. On July 21st, 1914, Joe Doyle would toss a no-hitter against Syracuse, which a no-hitter is no easy task. He played for the Elmira Colonels, and his team went on to win the championship, which is equivalent to a AA team today. It is believed that Joe Doyle's career ended in 1915 due to an injury with his throwing arm. So why is this card worth millions of dollars? Well, in 1980, Larry Fritch was sorting through his stacks of T206 cards and noticed something unusual about the Joe Doyle cards. He saw that one of the cards had the word NAT''L at the bottom, which stands for the National League. Joe has 2 cards in the T206 set. So the common version is on the left, which does not have the NAT''L. The rarer version has the NAT''L, which is the error on the card. Joe Doyle played for the Highlanders, New York's American League team, not for the National League team. It was told that the reason for the error is because they mixed him up with Larry Doyle. Larry actually played in New York for the National League's Giants. Here is the T206 cards for Larry Doyle. Larry played for the National League, so as you can see on the bottom, it has the NAT''L. What makes this even more interesting is Larry Doyle's middle name is Joe. Now, despite that coincidence, they are not related. But the fact that Larry Doyle played for the Giants is likely where this mix-up originated. We are told that the error was caught very quickly and only a small number of them were released. So when they caught this error, they then produced the rest with the NAT''L part removed. You would think they would add the American League to it, the AMER, but the American League team was never added to the card. Maybe adding that would have been more work. I'm not sure. Joe's error card can be found with the Piedmont 350 back. It is also believed that the Piedmont backs were the first series to be printed. So this error card is supposed to only have one back, which is this 350 back. After Joe Doyle's passing in 1947, his error card wasn't discovered until 1980, which is 33 years after his death. Now, who is Larry Fritch? He was the first full-time sports card dealer in the world. He was a pioneer for the sports card hobby. On March 28th, 2006, on a baseball forum, there was a conversation between a couple T206 collectors. A user that goes by the name of Art posted this. Larry did not want to raise any suspicions by just asking for the hands overhead pose. Luckily, there are 4 different Doyle cards. He told me this story personally years ago, and I also have copies of his want ads somewhere. So when Larry discovered this error card, he wanted to keep it low key. In the ads that he ran in the newspaper, he would broaden what he was looking for and just say he was looking for Doyle cards. Art goes on and says, the Doyle cards did pour in by the hundreds, but none were the Doyle variation. Larry was buying all Doyle cards. Even though Larry kept it a secret, I'm not sure exactly how it got out to the public. Maybe Larry decided to tell people about it. But this card started to become popular in the sports card world. Larry also had a sports card store in Wisconsin.
But inside it houses stack upon stack, row after row of baseball cards. 32 million of them in all. It's the largest collection of its kind, and it's the property of a 45-year-old kid named Larry Fritch.
He opened up a baseball card museum in New York in 1987. The museum was called A Story of Cards, the Larry Fritch Collection. But due to the distance and travel time, the museum closed in 1992. There's a New York Times article from 1987 that says Larry grew frustrated by his collection and that it was one of the best in the world, and it just sat in safety deposit boxes and bank vaults, and he wasn't enjoying it, and people weren't either. That's why he established a card museum. It was also known that Larry owned a Honus Wagner T206, and apparently he bought it in 1974 for $1,300.
The collection now includes such gems as this 3D card worth about $500, a set of 1916 Cracker Jack cards worth $10,000, and the most valuable single card of all, a 1909 Honus Wagner, which on the open market would fetch about $25,000. While these rare cards aren't for sale, just about everything else is. In fact, Fritch publishes and mails his own catalog to other collectors who place orders for some 5 million cards a year.
Jeremy, who is Larry's grandson, says that they still publish and mail out more than 10,000 print catalogs twice annually. His card store produced card catalogs and also produced different types of cards, minor league sets, reprint sets, and baseball sets. Not only was Larry a true collector, but he was an innovator and pioneer of the sports card world. Larry passed away on December 8th, 2007. Larry's son Jeff was also very important to his business. He ran the day-to-day operations for nearly 30 years, and he passed away in 2017. Jeff worked alongside his father for many years. Both were avid collectors. They not only ran the business, but also worked to create their own sets of minor league baseball cards, reprints of well-known hobby sets, and checklist books that are still in use by hobbyists today. Today, Fritch Cards operates with 7 employees from the same warehouse on a 26-acre farm. Larry started expanding it in 1975 after operating the business out of his basement, which also sits on the same property. In August of 2020, the card shop sold 12 unopened boxes of 1986 Fleer basketball cards, which sold for $1.8 million.
Back in the 60s and 50s, when a person collected baseball cards that was past the age of 15, he was looked upon as being a little bit different. Oh, that's that crazy Larry Fritch. You know, I've heard that story so many times. Of course, that's all changed today.
It certainly has changed. Collecting baseball cards is now a respectable hobby. And among collectors, there's no doubt that Larry Fritch is the big kid on the block.
I decided to do some research on this card, and I wanted to see how this card has increased over time. I came across this incredible written up article here, and this is from T206resource.com. They have documented the sales of each Joe Doyle Error card. Looks like the first time this card was auctioned off was in a raw condition in 1987, which was won by Larry Fritch. He owned 2 Joe Doyle Error cards. In 1990, one was also auctioned off in a raw condition, and it sold for $19,000. In the year 2000, a PSA 2 was auctioned off, and it sold for $178,598. In 2003, a PSA 3 was auctioned off and sold for $64,100. Now, what's strange about this PSA 3? When you type in the certification number, it comes up as the common Joe Doyle card. not the error card. And it has been slabbed in a new holder because it has the new label. So maybe this was determined to not be a real Joe Doyle Error card, and it was just the common version. In 2009, SGC 50 sold for $330,000. In 2010, an SGC Authentic grade sold for $186,155,000. But the problem with this one is when you type in the certification number, it does not come up in the SGC database. So maybe this one was also determined to not be real. In 2012, the raw card that sold in 1990 got graded a PSA 3 and sold for $414,750. In 2015, the same SGC 50 that sold in 2009 sold for $312,000. In 2016, a PSA 2 sold for $160,000, and then the same PSA 2 was sold in 2022 for $1,055,798, an incredible explosion in price. And then recently, we had a SGC 3.5 sell for $1.3 million. Now here's where it gets really strange. If you go to T206museum.com, there is an article named "Famous T206 Doyle Card is Pronounced a Phony." This was written by T.S. O'Connell from the year 2000. So in this article, Alan Rosen, also known as Mr. Mint, purchased a Joe Doyle Error card from a walk-in customer at the Philadelphia show. The card was graded by SGC with a grade of 10, which is like equivalent to a 1. So he paid $8,000 for the card, and then Alan decided to put it in his December 6 auction in 1999. On his auction, the card sold for more than $21,000 and was purchased by Keith Olbermann. Keith is an American sports and political commentator and writer. Keith almost immediately identified it as being altered, and he showed it to his friend and fellow collector to confirm his suspicions. Alan refunded Keith the full amount, says it was a certified check to reimburse him. According to this article, Alan ended up suing SGC to recover more than $23,000. SGC agreed to reimburse Rosen for the $8,000 and the cost of the advertising that he had done to promote the auction. But Alan wanted the amount that he had been forced to refund Olbermann and related cost, which was $23,177. Olbermann stated that you could see the ridge at the top of the glued-on National with the naked eye. Later, under a magnifying device provided by a friend, you could see that the bottom border of the card jutted downwards under the National glue-on. In short, you or I could glue together a more convincing version in no more than 2 or 3 tries. SGC's statement was, "We offered to reimburse him for the card and the advertising expenses. What we offered was above and beyond our guarantee. We're not in the business of allowing people to profit from these things." Assuming that the card is ultimately deemed to be fake, SGC officials said that they would destroy the card had Rosen accepted their offer and returned the card to them. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this story panned out, but I'm assuming this SGC card has been destroyed. What an interesting story. Now, who is Alan Rosen, also known as Mr. Mint? He was one of the biggest sports card dealers in the 1980s and 1990s, and he was also known for his creative and interesting advertising. In a Sports Illustrated article in 1988, he was called the King of Cards in the high-stakes baseball card game. Through his sports card dealer journey, he's owned 9 Honus Wagner T206 cards. He also found one of the greatest sports card finds in history. But we will get into that in a future video. It's such a fascinating story. Mr. Mint was a pioneer for the sports card world and had a huge impact on the hobby. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2017. Now, how many Joe Doyle cards are actually graded? In the PSA database, it says that there are 9 total graded, 3 PSA 2s, 3 PSA 3s, 1 PSA 3.5, 1 PSA 5, and 1 PSA 6. For BGS, there's 1 BGS 4. For SGC, there is 8 total graded. 1 SGC Authentic, 1 SGC 1, 2 SGC 3s, 1 SGC 3.5, 2 SGC 4s, and 1 SGC 5.5. In the PSA database, they say that there are 9 total graded, but when you hit the drop-down menu right here, it says there's only 3 graded with the Piedmont 350 back. So I find this a little strange. Maybe they just haven't imported them all in the database. We were told that the rarer version, the error card, only has the 350 back. So I wanted to try to find all of these serial numbers and pictures of these cards. On January 8th, 2009, a user by the name T206 Collector mentions a card that was irresponsibly graded by PSA for use in its coffee table book and not intended for distribution. I doubt that PSA unwittingly authenticated such a blatant fake, but given PSA's decision to showcase this card, I have to believe they made the card for their book. Then a user by the name of Scott said the fact that the serial number in the picture checks out on the PSA site as a legit card is disturbing, if in fact the card is as obvious of a fake as has been stated. Then a user by the name of JK says, isn't it ironic that this fake is displayed in a coffee table book published by PSA? User by the name of Eric says it has to be real. According to the article, it was originally graded a 5, then it got a 6 on resubmit, so it passed by twice. Then a user by the name of Dan said, how could they have missed twice? And how can the same card be a different grade each time? Never mind, I think I get it. So then I tried to find the coffee table book they were talking about, and I ended up finding it. It's called Collecting Sports Legends, The Ultimate Hobby Guide by Joe Orlando. On page 43 of this book, it shows the PSA 5 Joe Doyle Error card. So I typed in the serial number in the PSA database and it has been deactivated. So allegedly, I don't know this for 100% fact, but the PSA 5 has a polar bear back and it got through PSA and they put it in their book in 2008. Then it was resubmitted and it received a PSA 6. A user by the name PC says that there's 2 problems with the PSA 6, and that's the location of the printing from left and right margins, and the font is simply different. So if you put the PSA 5 right beside the new SGC 3.5, you can definitely tell that the fonts are different in my opinion. A user by the name of Jim states that the 350 only cards were printed with 13 backs. The 350 to 460 run has 23 different backs. The Doyle is printed with 8 backs. Its initial printing was less than other common cards printed 350 to 460 run. A user by the name of Ted states that the 350 only series cards' average number of tobacco backs is 9 different. Surveys have shown that most T206s in the 350 only series are very plentiful, except for the Joe Doyle card. These are the 8 different backs for the Joe Doyle common card. Also, if you want to include this blank back, that would be 9. So to the best of my knowledge, I tried to figure out which cards are real and which cards are not real in the PSA and SGC database. For PSA, we know that this PSA 2 is real and they crossed it over to a new label. This other PSA 2, the certification number checks out that it is real, but I'm a little on the fence on that one. The other PSA 2 could not find. PSA 3, real. Other PSA 3 not real comes up as a common Joe Doyle. The other PSA 3 I could not find. The PSA 3.5 used to be a SGC 4. That one is real. The PSA 5 not real, polar bear back. PSA 6 not real. And then something also that I found was a mislabeled PSA 3 polar bear back, which is currently on eBay. And then there's also this mislabeled PSA 4 that was on a baseball form. For the SGC pop report, the SGC authentic grade did not come up in the SGC database, so I'm assuming that one is not real. The SGC 1 was the Mr. Mint Joe Doyle, so we know that one is not real. I couldn't find either SGC 3. The SGC 3.5 is real. That's the one that sold recently. The SGC 4, we know that one's real. That one was crossed to a PSA 3.5. And then I couldn't find the SGC 4 or the SGC 5.5. And then for the BGS pop report, we have one BGS 4, and that one checks out to be real. Also from this form, Ted talks about that there's another variation of this Joe Doyle card. It's a printer's mark just to the right of the dot following the letter Y. According to Ted, this card makes it 17 of a total of 205 samples of this Doyle with the printer's mark. This translates to 8% of the Joe Doyle cards with this mark that have been noted in my 10 plus years survey. There is also another variation that has the bottom part of the Y missing. A user by the name of Pat states that this is also found on the Sovereign 350 back with an additional matching print flaw. Now, all of the grading companies make mistakes. Every human being makes mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. No one's perfect. Now, there's only one person that's perfect, and that's Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Can I get an amen? There's still a lot of questions to be answered with this Joe Doyle error card. Maybe we'll never know the exact amount of Joe Doyle error cards that are out there. As for now, it remains a mystery.